I came home from work on a Tuesday afternoon in October to find a construction crew building a storage shed on the section of Woodland that technically belonged to me, not the Pinecrest Hills Homeowners Association. And I knew immediately that Patricia Henderson had finally screwed up badly enough that I could make her pay for 3 years of harassment. My name is Trevor Quinn, and I have lived in this neighborhood outside of Charlotte, North Carolina for 5 years now. For the first 2 years, everything was fine. The HOA kept to themselves, collected their dues, and maintained the common areas without bothering anyone too much. Then Patricia Henderson became president after the previous guy retired to Florida, and my life became a special kind of suburban hell. Patricia was 52 years old with that specific haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," from 3 blocks away. Blonde highlights, aggressively styled, always wearing pastel cardigans and wielding her clipboard like a weapon. She had made it her personal mission to cite me for every possible violation she could dream up, from my mailbox being half an inch too tall according to her interpretation of the rules, to my grass allegedly being a 1/4 inch longer than regulations allowed, to the color of my front door being not quite the approved shade of colonial blue, even though I had the receipt showing I bought the exact paint listed in the HOA guidelines. The woodland in question was a strip of land about 1.5 acres in size that ran behind my property. When I bought my house, the property survey clearly showed this land belonged to me. It was heavily wooded with pine trees, oak trees, and plenty of underbrush. I loved it because it provided privacy and a buffer between my backyard and the rest of the neighborhood. I had paid property taxes on it every single year, but Patricia had apparently decided at some point that this land should belong to the HOA. I first learned about her thoughts on this matter about 6 months ago when she showed up at my door with 2 other board members, demanding I sign over the deed to that woodland parcel for the good of the community. I had laughed in her face, which probably was not the smartest move in hindsight, but the request was so absurd I could not help myself. The property was legally mine. I had the deed, the survey, the tax records, everything. There was no ambiguity whatsoever. Patricia had turned bright red, told me I was being selfish and unneighborly, and stormed off my porch. I thought that was the end of it, but over the following months, I started getting increasingly aggressive letters from the HOA claiming that there were disputed property boundaries that needed to be resolved through proper channels. I sent back copies of my deed and survey, each time with a polite note saying there was nothing to dispute. Now, watching 4 guys in work boots unload lumber and tools while a foundation of concrete blocks was already laid, I realized Patricia had decided to just take what she wanted and hope I would not fight back. I pulled out my phone and started recording video as I walked down the slope from my backyard toward the construction site. The workers looked up as I approached, and one of them, a heavy-set guy with a gray beard, held up his hand. "Sorry, sir. This is a construction site. HOA project. You will need to keep your distance," he said, not unkindly. "This is my property," I said, keeping my voice level and my phone camera rolling. "Do you have a permit for this construction?" The bearded guy's expression shifted to confusion. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in low tones. After a minute, he walked over to me. "My boss says we have all the paperwork in order. The HOA hired us, showed us the property boundaries, and we are building according to the specifications we were given. If you have a dispute with the HOA, you need to take it up with them, not us." "I understand you are just doing your job," I said, "but I am telling you right now that this is my property and you are trespassing. I am going to be taking legal action against the HOA, and you might want to verify their claims before you do any more work." I could see the wheels turning in his head. Construction companies did not want to get caught up in property disputes. But he also had a contract and probably needed the work. "I will have my boss reach out to the HOA again," he said finally. "But until I hear otherwise, we have got to keep working. We have a timeline." I nodded and walked back to my house, my blood pressure rising with each step. Inside, I immediately called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, who had helped me with the house purchase years ago. Marcus listened to my explanation, asked a few questions, and then said the magic words I was hoping to hear. "They are trespassing, and they are building an unauthorized structure on your property. This is actually pretty cut and dried. I can file for an emergency injunction to stop construction, and we can demand removal of the structure. But Trevor, this is going to get expensive if they fight it." "I do not care," I said. "Patricia has been making my life miserable for years. If she wants to hand me this kind of ammunition, I am going to use it." "All right. Let me make some calls. Do not interfere with the construction crew yourself. Let me handle this through proper legal channels. Can you get me copies of your deed and property survey? I will email them to you in 10 minutes. After I sent the documents, I went back outside and took extensive photos and videos of the construction from every angle, making sure to capture the location relative to my house and property markers. I also walked the property line and found the iron stakes that had been placed during the original survey. The construction site was definitely, unquestionably on my land. The next morning, I woke up to find the framing for the shed already completed. These guys worked fast. I took more photos and sent them to Marcus. He called me around 10 in the morning. "I have filed for the emergency injunction. There will be a hearing tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, I have sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA and to the construction company. Legally, they should stop work immediately." "Do you think they will?" "The construction company might. The HOA," he laughed. "Based on what you have told me about this Patricia person, I would bet money she tells them to keep working." Marcus was right. When I got home from work that evening, the shed had a roof, walls, and they were installing a door. It was a substantial structure, probably 16 by 20 feet, with vinyl siding that matched the neighborhood aesthetic. My phone rang. It was Patricia. "Mr. Quinn," she said in that syrupy sweet tone she used when she was pretending to be reasonable. "I understand you have been harassing our construction crew." "I informed them they were building on my property without permission," I said. "That is not harassment. That is a statement of fact. The property boundaries in our neighborhood have always been somewhat fluid, and this particular parcel has been maintained by the HOA for years." "That is a lie, Patricia. I mow right up to the tree line. I have paid taxes on that land every single year. You have never maintained anything on it." "Well, we have a different understanding of the situation. The HOA board has voted unanimously to move forward with this community storage facility, and we expect all residents to support community improvements. Then you should have built it on land the HOA actually owns. Did you even bother to check the property surveys before you started construction?" There was a pause. "Our records show that parcel is part of the common areas. Your records are wrong, and you are going to find that out very soon in court. My attorney has filed for an emergency injunction. There is a hearing tomorrow." Another pause, longer this time. "You are suing the HOA." Her voice had gone cold. "The HOA is building an unauthorized structure on my private property. So yes, I am taking legal action. You should probably get a lawyer." She hung up without saying goodbye. The hearing the next day was in Mecklenburg County Civil Court. I took the afternoon off work and met Marcus in the courthouse lobby. Patricia was there with 2 other board members, Gerald Moss and Susan Fletcher. Along with an attorney I did not recognize who looked fresh out of law school and deeply uncomfortable. The hearing itself was quick. Marcus presented my deed, the official property survey, and the tax records showing I had been paying taxes on the parcel for 5 years. He showed photos of the construction and explained that the HOA had been repeatedly informed they were trespassing, but had refused to stop. The HOA's attorney tried to argue that there was some ambiguity in the property boundaries, and that the HOA had been operating under a good faith belief that they owned the land. Marcus demolished that argument by pointing out that I had literally sent them copies of my deed and survey multiple times over the past 6 months, so there was no good faith involved. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Carolyn Martinez, reviewed the documents for about 3 minutes before looking up. This seems fairly straightforward. Mr. Quinn has provided clear documentation that he owns the property in question. Does the HOA have any documentation showing they own this parcel? The HOA attorney shuffled papers. Your Honor, we are still researching the historical records. So no, you do not have documentation. Mr. Quinn, when did you first inform the HOA that they were building on your property? The first day they started construction, Your Honor, and I had previously sent them my deed and survey when they asked me to sign over the land about 6 months ago. Judge Martinez turned to the HOA attorney. So your clients were informed before construction began that they were trespassing, and they proceeded anyway. Your Honor, there was a misunderstanding about the property lines, Counselor. Property lines are not a matter of misunderstanding when there is a legal survey. I am granting the emergency injunction. All construction must stop immediately. Furthermore, the HOA is ordered to remove the structure from Mr. Quinn's property within 30 days, restoring the land to its original condition. Patricia made a noise like a strangled cat from the row behind me. Your Honor, the HOA attorney said desperately, the structure is nearly complete. The expense of removal would be significant. Then your client should not have built it on someone else's property. 30 days. If the structure is not removed, Mr. Quinn is authorized to remove it himself and bill the HOA for the costs. This hearing is concluded. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. Marcus was grinning. That went even better than I expected. She really did not have a leg to stand on. Want to grab a coffee and discuss next steps? What next steps? She ordered them to remove it. Sure, but you could also sue for damages, legal fees, trespass, potentially intentional infliction of emotional distress given the history of harassment. You have got a strong case. I thought about it. Let me see if they actually comply with the order first. If they remove the shed and leave me alone, maybe I will let it go. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You are a more forgiving person than I would be. I drove home feeling victorious, expecting to find the construction crew packing up their tools. Instead, I found them installing shelving units inside the shed. I called Marcus immediately. They are violating the injunction, he said flatly. Take photos, send them to me, and do not engage with the workers. I am going to file a motion for contempt. This is going to get very expensive for the HOA very quickly. Over the next week, I watched with a mixture of disbelief and glee as Patricia apparently decided to go all in on her terrible decision. Not only did the construction crew finish the shed completely, but the HOA started moving equipment into it. Lawn mowers, leaf blowers, shovels, rakes, bags of fertilizer, cases of light bulbs, stacks of paint cans, all the supplies the HOA used for maintaining the common areas in the neighborhood. I documented everything. Photos, videos, dates, and times. I watched as Patricia herself showed up with Susan Fletcher to organize the interior, installing pegboards and labeling shelves. They even had a locksmith install a heavy-duty padlock on the door. Marcus was practically salivating when I sent him the updates. "Trevor, do you understand what she is doing? She is not just violating the injunction, she is improving and stocking the structure. When you win the contempt motion, and you will win it, the judge is going to order the shed and everything in it removed from your property. Everything they are putting in there is just making their eventual loss more expensive. So you are saying I should just let them keep going? Unless you want them to stop and cut their losses, yes. Every day they continue. Every dollar they invest in that structure, it just adds to what they are going to owe you." I thought about all the times Patricia had cited me for non-existent violations, all the threatening letters, all the neighborhood meetings where she had made snide comments about my lack of community spirit, because I would not volunteer for every single HOA event. I thought about the time she had tried to fine me $500 because my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day, even though I had been out of town and a windstorm had blown them over. "Let them keep going," I said. The contempt hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, the HOA treated the shed like it was their legitimate property. They held a board meeting about reassigning maintenance duties now that there was convenient centralized storage. Patricia sent out a neighborhood email bragging about the new community amenity and how it would improve operational efficiency. I saved all of it. Gerald Moss, the HOA vice president, actually knocked on my door one evening. He was in his late 50s, a retired accountant who usually just went along with whatever Patricia said. "Trevor, can we talk?" he asked, looking uncomfortable. I invited him in and offered him a beer, which he accepted. "Look," he said after taking a long drink. "I know things have been tense between you and Patricia. I am here unofficially, not representing the board, just neighbor to neighbor. Is there any way we can work this out without more legal action? Gerald, she built a shed on my property after I explicitly told her it was my property and sent her documentation proving it. Then a judge ordered her to remove it, and she not only refused but doubled down and turned it into a fully operational storage facility. What exactly is there to work out? She thinks you are bluffing. She thinks you will eventually back down because fighting the HOA is expensive and exhausting. Does she not realize that I am winning, that every court appearance has gone completely in my favor?" Gerald sighed. "Patricia does not see it that way. She thinks the judge made a mistake and that a higher court will see things her way. Between you and me, I think she has lost her mind about this. But she has Susan and the other board members convinced that this is about protecting the HOA's authority. If they back down to you, other residents might start challenging their decisions. So this is about her ego. Entirely about her ego," Gerald confirmed. "And now we are all going to pay for it. HOA legal fees come out of the reserve fund, which means all of us homeowners are going to end up footing the bill for her stubbornness. You could vote her out as president. I tried to call for a vote last week. She shut me down, claimed it violated procedure. I think I am going to resign from the board. I do not want any part of this disaster." After Gerald left, I felt a tiny bit of sympathy for the other homeowners who were going to get hit with special assessments to cover Patricia's legal bills. But only a tiny bit, because plenty of those same homeowners had stood by silently while Patricia had harassed me for years. The contempt hearing was even more satisfying than the first one. Judge Martinez looked genuinely angry as Marcus presented photo after photo of the HOA not only failing to remove the shed but actively improving and using it. "Counsel," she said to the HOA's attorney, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. How does your client explain this blatant violation of a court order? Your Honor, the HOA board believed that they were exercising their right to appeal. Did they file an appeal? Well, no, Your Honor, but then they had no right to ignore my order. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of contempt I have seen in years. Not only did they fail to remove the structure, they completed it and are actively using it. Mr. Quinn's attorney has documented dozens of instances of the HOA accessing and utilizing this illegally constructed building on his property. Patricia stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, this is a vital community resource. Sit down, Miss Henderson, Judge Martinez snapped. You will speak when you are called upon, not before. Patricia sat, her face bright red. The judge continued. The HOA is fined $10,000 for contempt of court. Additionally, I am giving Mr. Quinn the option to either wait for the HOA to remove the structure at their expense, or to take possession of the structure and all its contents in lieu of removal, with the HOA forfeiting any right to the materials. I glanced at Marcus, who gave me a small nod. Your Honor, I said, standing up, I would like to take possession of the structure and its contents. So ordered. The structure and everything in it now belongs to Mr. Quinn. The HOA is to turn over all keys and access codes immediately, and is prohibited from entering Mr. Quinn's property or accessing the structure from this moment forward. Any violation will result in additional contempt charges and potential criminal trespass charges. Furthermore, Mr. Quinn is awarded his legal fees to date. Do you understand, Miss Henderson? Patricia looked like she was going to have a stroke. You cannot just give him our property. That shed cost $15,000 to build, and the equipment inside is worth at least another $20,000. You built it on his property without permission after being repeatedly warned that you were trespassing. Consider it an expensive lesson in respecting property rights. If you have nothing else, this hearing is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was actually laughing. Trevor, do you realize what just happened? You now own a brand new shed and about $20,000 worth of landscaping equipment. And they still have to pay the $10,000 contempt fine plus your legal fees, which are going to be around $12,000. How much are you billing me? I asked. After they pay the court-ordered fees. Nothing. You are paid in full. This is the easiest case I have had all year. That evening, I walked down to the shed with the keys that the HOA attorney had handed over in the courthouse parking lot. I unlocked the padlock and opened the door, taking in the neatly organized interior. 2 commercial-grade lawn mowers, 4 leaf blowers, string trimmers, hedge clippers, 2 full sets of landscaping tools, extension cords, work lights, and enough paint, fertilizer, and supplies to maintain a small golf course. Everything was labeled and organized with the kind of obsessive precision that screamed Patricia Henderson. I pulled out my phone and called my neighbor directly to the east, a guy named Tim Bradford, who I had been friendly with over the years. Tim, you still do landscaping on the side? Yeah, I've got a few residential clients. Why? How would you like to buy some equipment at a very good price? I ended up selling about half the equipment to Tim and a few other people over the next week, making almost $11,000. The rest I kept, figuring I could use it or sell it later. The shed itself was actually really well built and useful, so I decided to keep it right where it was. Patricia's response was to send me a certified letter demanding I return HOA property and threatening legal action. I forwarded it to Marcus, who sent back a response explaining that the property now legally belonged to me by court order and that any further harassment would result in another lawsuit. 2 weeks later, I got a special assessment notice in my mailbox. Every homeowner in Pinecrest Hills was being charged $700 to replenish the HOA's depleted legal defense fund. The notice included a passive-aggressive paragraph about how certain residents had forced the HOA to incur legal expenses by refusing to work cooperatively with the board. My phone started ringing that evening. Turned out, none of the other homeowners had been informed about the property dispute or the lawsuit until they got their special assessment bills. Patricia had kept the whole thing quiet, apparently hoping she would win and could make it all go away. Now people wanted answers. Tim was the first to call. "Dude, what the hell happened? Why are we all being charged $700? I explained the whole situation, from Patricia's initial demand that I sign over my property to the illegal construction to the court orders she had ignored. "Wait," Tim said. "She built a shed on your actual property and then refused to remove it when a judge told her to." "Yep. And now she lost the shed, all the equipment that was in it, had to pay a $10,000 contempt fine, and had to pay my legal fees. So the HOA is out something like $50,000 total because Patricia decided she wanted my land and would not take no for an answer. Jesus Christ, can we remove her as president? I think you would need a majority vote of homeowners. Check your bylaws." Over the next few days, I had similar conversations with about a dozen neighbors. Some of them I knew casually. Others I had never really talked to before. All of them were furious about the special assessment, and even more furious when they learned it was entirely Patricia's fault. A petition started circulating calling for an emergency meeting to remove Patricia and the other board members who had supported her decisions. I stayed out of it, figuring I had done enough and did not need to be seen as leading a crusade. The emergency meeting was held on a Saturday morning at the neighborhood clubhouse. I almost did not go, but Marcus convinced me I should attend to answer any questions about the legal case. The clubhouse was packed. Pinecrest Hills had about 200 homes, and it looked like at least 100 people showed up. Patricia stood at the front with Susan Fletcher and Dennis Morgan, another board member. Gerald Moss had apparently already resigned, as he had warned he might. Patricia called the meeting to order and immediately went on the offensive. "I know many of you have questions about the recent special assessment," she began, her voice tight. "I want to assure you that the board acted in the best interests of the community at all times. We have been fighting to protect HOA property rights against a selfish homeowner who refused to cooperate with community improvement plans. You built a shed on Trevor's property," someone shouted from the crowd. "The property boundaries were disputed." "No, they were not." Tim stood up, holding papers. "I requested copies of all the documents from the court case through the public records. Trevor had a legal deed and survey. You had nothing. There was no dispute. You just decided you wanted his land and tried to take it." Patricia's face flushed. "The board believed we had legitimate claim. Then why did you lose every single court hearing?" Another voice called out. The meeting devolved into chaos for a few minutes before someone finally called for order and proposed an immediate vote of no confidence in Patricia as president. Patricia tried to shut down the vote, claiming it was not properly noticed and violated procedure, but enough people shouted her down that she finally relented. The vote was not even close. Patricia was removed as president by a margin of 93-7. Susan Fletcher and Dennis Morgan were also voted out. 3 new temporary board members were elected on the spot with instructions to review the HOA's finances and legal position and report back to the community. As people filed out after the meeting, Patricia made a beeline for me. "I hope you are happy," she hissed. "You have destroyed this community." I did not do anything, Patricia. I just refused to let you steal my property. You destroyed your own credibility all by yourself. That land should belong to the HOA. It was always meant to be common area. You are being selfish keeping it for yourself. Then the developer should have designated it as common area when the neighborhood was built, but they did not. They sold it to me as part of my property, and I am not giving it up because you decided you want it. Susan Fletcher put a hand on Patricia's arm, trying to pull her away, but Patricia shook her off. You have turned the entire neighborhood against us, she said. We were doing everything for the good of the community, and you made us look like criminals. Patricia, you built a structure on my land after I told you not to, then ignored a court order to remove it. You did not pay attention to property rights, and it cost the HOA $50,000. Nobody made you look like anything. Your actions speak for themselves. She opened her mouth to respond, then seemed to deflate. She turned and walked away, Susan hurrying after her. I thought that was the end of it. The new board sent out an email apologizing for the special assessment and announcing they were exploring options to recover funds from the previous board members for mismanagement. Patricia resigned her HOA membership entirely and put her house up for sale 2 weeks later. Then things got weird. About a month after Patricia moved out, I started noticing things missing from the shed. Small stuff at first. A bag of fertilizer, some work gloves, a rake. I figured maybe I had misremembered what I had kept versus what I sold. But then one morning I went out and found one of the lawn mowers missing. I checked the lock. No signs of forced entry, but the lock itself was not the original one I had installed. Someone had swapped it out for an identical-looking model and had a key. I called the police and filed a report. The responding officer, a young guy named Officer Jason Miller, took the report but did not seem optimistic about recovering anything. Without witnesses or video, there is not much we can do. Could be neighborhood kids, could be someone who heard you had equipment and decided to help themselves. You might want to install a camera. I ordered a trail camera that night and installed it inside the shed pointing at the door. 2 days later, I got a motion alert on my phone at 2 in the morning. I pulled up the camera feed and watched in disbelief as Patricia Henderson, who I had thought moved away, unlocked the shed door and walked inside with a flashlight. I called 911 immediately. This is not an active break-in emergency, the dispatcher said. Can you confirm the intruder is still on the property? I checked the camera. Patricia was loading tools into a wheelbarrow. Yes, she is still here right now, actively stealing my property. Officers are on the way. Do not confront the intruder yourself. Stay inside your home. I watched through the camera feed as Patricia made 3 trips back and forth, hauling equipment through the woods. She was loading it into a vehicle parked on the street behind the neighborhood, accessing my property through a path that ran along the boundary line. The police arrived about 8 minutes later. I met them at my front door and showed them the live camera feed. Officer Miller was back, this time with a more senior officer named Sergeant Lisa Ramirez. You can identify this person? Sergeant Ramirez asked. That is Patricia Henderson. She used to be the HOA president, and she is the person who built this shed on my property in the first place. She apparently still has a key even though the court ordered her to turn over all access. We walked down to the shed. Patricia was gone, but the camera had captured clear footage of her face, and I had her license plate number from when she drove away. This is pretty straightforward theft and trespassing, Sergeant Ramirez said. Given that there is a court order already in place regarding this property, she is also potentially violating that. We will go pick her up. Wait, I said. She moved. I do not know where she lives now. We will track her down through the DMV records. This might take a few days, but we will find her." It took 4 days. Turned out Patricia had not actually moved away. She had been staying with her sister in a neighborhood about 3 miles from Pinecrest Hills. When the police showed up with a warrant, they found my lawn mower, 2 leaf blowers, and a bunch of other equipment in her sister's garage. Patricia was arrested and charged with felony theft, criminal trespass, and violation of a court order. Her bail was set at $20,000. Marcus called me when he heard the news. "Trevor, this woman has seriously lost her mind. What was she thinking?" "I have no idea. Maybe she just could not accept that she lost. Like she still thinks that shed and everything in it should belong to the HOA, so taking it back is not stealing in her mind." Well, the criminal justice system is going to explain otherwise. Have the police talked to you about the case? They took my statement and copied the camera footage. The detective said it is a strong case because I have video evidence and a paper trail showing she had no legal right to access the property. The case moved slowly through the system, as these things do. Patricia was released on bail and apparently hired a criminal defense attorney who tried to argue that there was some confusion about ownership of the property and the equipment. The prosecutor was not having it, given the multiple court orders clearly establishing that everything belonged to me. In the meantime, the new HOA board was dealing with fallout from Patricia's reign. An audit of the HOA finances revealed that she had been spending money without board approval for years, including the $15,000 for the shed construction that should have required a vote of the full board. There were other questionable expenses too, including several $1,000s paid to a consulting company that turned out to be owned by Susan Fletcher's husband. The board filed a civil suit against Patricia, Susan, and Dennis for misappropriation of HOA funds. Gerald Moss, who had resigned before the shed debacle came to a head, was not included in the suit. Patricia's criminal case went to trial 8 months later. I had to testify, explaining the history of the property dispute and the court orders Patricia had violated. The prosecutor showed the jury the camera footage of Patricia breaking into the shed at 2 in the morning and stealing equipment that had been legally awarded to me by a court. Patricia's defense attorney tried to paint her as a dedicated community volunteer who had made some mistakes but had no criminal intent. The prosecutor pointed out that breaking into someone's property in the middle of the night with a key you were supposed to have surrendered, then stealing several $1,000s worth of equipment, showed pretty clear criminal intent regardless of whether you thought you were in the right. The jury deliberated for about 3 hours before coming back with guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing, Patricia's attorney asked for probation, arguing that she had no prior criminal record and had already suffered enough through the public humiliation of being removed from the HOA board and having to sell her house. The prosecutor argued for jail time, pointing out that Patricia had shown a consistent pattern of believing she was above the law, from ignoring the initial court orders about the shed to continuing to steal from my property, even after being caught once. Judge Martinez, who had presided over the original property dispute, was also handling the criminal case. She looked at Patricia with something like pity before announcing the sentence. "Miss Henderson, you had multiple opportunities to walk away from this situation. When Mr. Quinn told you the land was his, you could have checked the property records and accepted that fact. When I ordered you to remove the shed, you could have complied and cut your losses. When I held you in contempt and awarded the property to Mr. Quinn, you could have accepted that judgment and moved on with your life. Instead, at every turn, you chose to escalate. You chose to believe that your judgment was superior to everyone else's, including the courts. That level of arrogance and disrespect for the law cannot be ignored. I am sentencing you to 18 months in jail, suspended to 6 months with credit for time served, followed by 2 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution to Mr. Quinn for the value of the stolen property, and you are prohibited from entering Pinecrest Hills or contacting any of the residents, including Mr. Quinn, during your probation period. Patricia started crying. Her attorney put an arm around her shoulders and led her out of the courtroom after the judge dismissed them. I felt a strange mix of emotions walking out of the courthouse that day. Relief, certainly. Vindication, absolutely. But also a kind of exhausted sadness that things had gone this far. If Patricia had just accepted no for an answer at any point in the previous 2 years, none of this would have happened. The civil suit against Patricia, Susan, and Dennis took even longer to resolve. The HOA's attorneys uncovered more financial irregularities, including credit card charges for personal expenses that Patricia had hidden in various budget categories. By the time everything was tallied up, Patricia had misappropriated about $40,000 over her 3-year tenure as president. Susan's husband's consulting company had been paid nearly $20,000 for services that were never actually rendered. Dennis had approved several contracts with vendors who gave him kickbacks. All 3 of them ended up settling the civil suit rather than go to trial. Patricia paid back $30,000, which was apparently all she could manage after legal fees and selling her house. Susan and her husband paid back the $20,000 plus interest. Dennis paid $15,000 and resigned from his job as a real estate agent after the local board started investigating him for ethics violations. The HOA recovered about $65,000 total, which went back into the reserve fund. The new board sent out a notice that the special assessment would be refunded to all homeowners who had paid it, and there was much rejoicing. Life in Pinecrest Hills slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board, led by a retired teacher named Margaret Torres, took a much more hands-off approach to enforcement and actually read the governing documents before making decisions. Revolutionary concepts, apparently. I kept the shed, obviously. It became my favorite place on the property, a perfect workspace for projects and storage for all my outdoor equipment. Sometimes I would sit in there on a hot afternoon, enjoying the shade and the breeze through the trees, and think about the absolute absurdity of the journey that led to me owning it. Tim Bradford liked to joke that I had pulled off the greatest long con in HOA history, letting Patricia build me a free shed and stock it with equipment before taking possession of everything. But it was not a con. It was just Patricia's own stubbornness and refusal to accept reality coming back to bite her in the most expensive way possible. About a year after everything was resolved, I was working in the shed when Gerald Moss stopped by. He had stayed in the neighborhood and had actually become friendlier with me after the whole ordeal. "Hey Trevor, got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, come on in." He stepped into the shed and looked around, shaking his head. "You know, I was there when Patricia first got the idea to take this land. We were doing a walk-through of the neighborhood, planning maintenance priorities, and she saw this wooded area behind your house. She said it would be perfect for storage, and I pointed out that it was probably part of your property. She said she would check the records. Obviously, she never did, or if she did, she just decided to ignore them. Why did not you push back harder when she decided to build anyway?" Gerald sighed. "Honestly, I was tired. I was getting ready to retire from the board anyway, and I figured if she wanted to waste HOA money on a property dispute, That was going to be the next board's problem. I did not realize she would go completely off the rails about it. By the time I understood how bad it was getting, she had the other board members convinced that backing down would make the HOA look weak. It became this whole thing about authority and control instead of just admitting a mistake. Do you think she really believed she was in the right, or was it just ego? Both, I think. Patricia is one of those people who cannot admit they are wrong about anything. She would rather burn everything down than say I made a mistake, and in the end, that is exactly what she did. She lost her position, her reputation, her house, her freedom for a while, and about $70,000 when you add up the legal fees and settlement. All because she could not accept that this piece of land was not hers to take. We stood in silence for a moment, looking at the shelving Patricia had installed, still sturdy and level. "Well," Gerald said finally, "at least you got a nice shed out of it," I laughed. "Best shed in the neighborhood, apparently." Though I could have done without the 2 years of stress and legal fees. Marcus got you paid back though, right? Yeah, between the court-ordered fees and the settlement, I came out ahead financially. Not by much after you account for my time and aggravation, but I am not complaining. After Gerald left, I finished organizing some tools and locked up the shed. Walking back to my house, I looked at the tree line marking where my property started and thought about how much trouble could have been avoided if people just respected boundaries, both literal and figurative. The shed still stands on my property today, a monument to one woman's inability to accept the word no and the consequences that followed. I use it regularly, and every time I unlock that door, I feel a small sense of satisfaction knowing that Patricia's attempt to take something that was not hers ended with her giving me far more than she ever intended. Sometimes neighbors ask about the story behind the shed, especially newer residents who moved in after the drama died down. I usually give them the short version. The HOA built it on my land by mistake. We went to court. The judge gave me the shed. Most people laugh and shake their heads at the absurdity of it. But every once in a while, someone asks for the full story, and I tell them about Patricia Henderson and her spectacular failure to understand that property rights matter, court orders matter, and sometimes the harder you fight for something you have no right to, the more you lose. The shed is just a building, 16 by 20 feet of vinyl siding and pressure-treated lumber. But it represents something bigger, the idea that standing up for yourself matters, even when it is exhausting and expensive and would be easier to just give in. Patricia counted on me backing down, on the fight being too much trouble, on her persistence wearing me out. She was wrong. And now, I have a really nice shed to show for it, fully stocked with equipment, sitting on land that is unquestionably, legally, and forever mine. Patricia is somewhere else, hopefully learning that the world does not reorganize itself around your demands just because you insist loudly enough. The Pinecrest Hills HOA sends out monthly newsletters now, full of reasonable reminders and actual community news. Margaret Torres has been re-elected president twice, running on a platform of not being Patricia Henderson, which apparently is all anyone wants from an HOA president these days. Life is quiet. My grass grows at whatever length I maintain it at, and nobody measures it with a ruler. My trash cans occasionally stay visible for an extra day, and no one sends me threatening letters. My front door is still the same shade of colonial blue it has always been, and no one cares. And in my backyard, surrounded by oak trees and pine trees and the sound of birds calling to each other, sits a 16 by 20-foot storage shed that cost me nothing but patience and the willingness to stand my ground. Best shed I never planned on owning, full of equipment I never intended to acquire, All thanks to Patricia Henderson's determination to take something that was never hers to begin with. Sometimes justice is poetic. Sometimes it is expensive. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, it comes with a fully stocked storage shed and the satisfaction of knowing you were right all along. The moral of the story, if there is one, is simple. Check your property boundaries before you build, respect court orders when you lose, and never underestimate the determination of a homeowner who knows the law is on his side. And if you are going to build something on someone else's property, at least have the good sense not to fill it with expensive equipment before the legal battle is over.